when a dying human soldier whispered, "Don't risk your people for me." The alien merchant saved him anyway, 15 years later. When her enemies came with 200 warships, humanity arrived with 73 and a message: "We never forget our debts." The medical bay of the Vryn trade vessel Harmonious Prophet smelled of copper and fear. Ambassador Kalith's secondary hands trembled as she worked the regeneration field over the dying human's chest, the crater where his lungs should have been pulsed with each failing heartbeat, and the crimson blood so much brighter than Vryn ichor pooled across the sterile floor. "Why are we doing this?" First Merchant Thorax chittered from the doorway, his mandibles clicking nervously. "The human conflict is not our concern. The Zarkonian Dominion will see this as taking sides." Kalith didn't look up. Her 4 eyes remained fixed on the human's pale face, on the way his lips had turned blue despite her best efforts. He was young, barely past the maturation age for his species. His uniform bore the insignia of the Terran colonial marines, and the scorched holes across his body told a story of overwhelming firepower and desperate retreat. "We follow the merchant code," Kalith said softly, increasing the power to the regeneration field. "Any species, any situation, we heal who we can. The code also says we don't endanger the fleet." Thorax's voice carried an edge of panic. 3 Zarkonian warships are in pursuit. They'll arrive in less than a standard cycle. If they find a human survivor aboard our ship, then we'll explain. Keyleth's primary hands never stopped moving, injecting stem catalyst directly into the human's chest cavity. "We're merchants, neutral parties. The Dominion respects the old agreements. They respect nothing but power," Thorax shrieked. "You didn't see what they did to the human colony world. I was on the observation deck when we passed Kepler 442. The entire planet was glass, Keleth. Melted glass. 3 billion humans gone in a single bombardment. The Zarkonians don't take prisoners, and they don't forgive those who help their enemies." For the first time, Kalith's hands hesitated. 3 billion. She'd heard rumors, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach sacs clench. The human beneath her fingers twitched, a groan escaping his lips. His eyes flickered open brown like earth soil and found hers. "Don't," he whispered, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. "Don't risk your people for me." Kalith felt something break inside her chest, here, dying, in agony. And the human's first conscious thought was for the safety of aliens he'd never met. She made her decision. "Thorax, prepare my personal shuttle. Navigation locked to the nearest human outpost, automated flight." "What?" "Kalith, no. That's an order, First Merchant." She pulled a plasma welder from the medical kit and began sealing the human's wounds with practiced efficiency. It wasn't pretty, but it would keep him alive. "I'm invoking Mercy Protocol. Transfer him to the shuttle with 7 days of supplies and medical stasis. If the Zarkonians board us, we'll have no evidence of aiding the enemy." The human's hand, so much smaller than her own, grasped her primary wrist. "Your name," he gasped. "Need to remember who saved me. Ambassador Keleth of House Vryn, representative of the merchant fleet." She pressed an injector against his neck, flooding his system with antibiotics and pain suppressors. "And you, human?" "Marcus. Sergeant Marcus Chen, Terran Marines." His eyes were already glazing from the medication. "I won't forget. Promise I won't forget." Within the hour, the shuttle was away, a silver streak disappearing toward human territory. The Harmonious Prophet altered course, moving deeper into neutral space. When the Zarkonian warships arrived, Kalith met them with open manifests and calm dignity, even as their obsidian-armored soldiers tore through her ship searching for human survivors. They found nothing. "You're fortunate." "Merchant," the Zarkonian commander growled, his scaled face inches from hers. "If I discovered you'd aided the human infestation, I would have fed you to the void myself." Kalith kept her expression neutral, all 4 eyes meeting his without flinching. "The merchant fleet is neutral, Commander. We trade with all, fight with none." The commander studied her for a long moment, then turned away. "See that you remember that, Vryn. This war will end with human extinction. Choose your side carefully." As the Zarkonian ships departed, Thorax approached Kalith in her private quarters. "That was incredibly foolish," he said, but his tone had softened. "Also incredibly brave." Kalith stared out the viewport toward the distant stars where human space lay. "Do you think he'll make it? The shuttle's automated systems are reliable. If any human patrol finds him." Thorax clicked his mandibles in the Vryn equivalent of a shrug. Then perhaps he'll live. Perhaps he'll tell the story of the Vryn who risked everything for a single human life. Perhaps, Kalith agreed, but she didn't truly believe it. In a war of extinction, what difference could one saved life make? She would learn the answer, though not for many years. 15 standard years later, the war had transformed the galaxy beyond recognition. Captain Selena Vasquez of the Terran dreadnought Indomitable Will stood in the Tactical Command Center, studying the holographic display of the Zarkonian fleet, 200 warships all bearing down on the Vryn Merchant Fleet Sanctuary Station at Riftgate 7. Her jaw tightened. "They're not even trying to hide their intentions," Commander Park said beside her. "Direct assault vector. The Vryn have maybe 6 defense platforms. They'll be slaughtered." "The Zarkonians declared the merchant fleet a legitimate target last month," Celine replied, her voice hard. "Claimed they were funneling supplies to human resistance cells." "Were they?" "Probably." Celine pulled up the casualty estimates. 30,000 Vryn civilians on that station. Merchants, families, hatchlings. The Vryn have been quietly helpful. Nothing overt, nothing that breaks their neutrality agreements. But a shipment of food that arrives at a human refugee camp, medical supplies that find their way to field hospitals. They've been guardian angels working in the shadows. Park crossed his arms. "Command won't authorize intervention. We're spread too thin as it is, and Riftgate 7 is technically in neutral space. If we engage, it could pull another dozen species into the war." "I know the political situation, Commander." Celine's fingers drummed against the console. Then she noticed something on the manifest roster. "Pull up the Sanctuary Station's leadership. Who's in charge?" A moment later, a hologram appeared. A Vryn female, older now, her carapace marked with the silver patterns of age and honor. 4 intelligent eyes gazed out from the recorded image. "Ambassador Kalith of House Vryn," Park read. "She's been running humanitarian operations for the past decade. Quite the reputation, actually. They call her the Merciful in certain circles." Celine felt something click in her memory. "Kalith. Computer, search Terran military records. Cross-reference that name with any rescue operations during the war's early years." The system chimed. A file appeared old, partially corrupted, but readable. Celine's eyes widened as she read. "Sergeant Marcus Chen, Terran Marines. Rescued by Vryn merchant vessel Harmonious Prophet during the Kepler 442 evacuation. Primary rescuer identified as Ambassador Kalith of House Vryn. Chen's testimony indicates the Vryn risked significant danger from Zarkonian reprisal to save his life." Celine looked up at Park. "Marcus. Chen, that name sounds familiar." Park's face had gone pale. "It should, Captain. General Marcus Chen, commander of Terran Strategic Forces. He's literally the 3rd highest ranking officer in the entire human military." The pieces fell into place. Celine opened a secure channel, her heart pounding. This was career suicide, or it was brilliance. There was no middle ground. "This is Captain Selena Vasquez of the TDS Indomitable Will, requesting immediate priority connection to General Chen at Strategic Command." General Marcus Chen looked older than his 53 years. The weight of a 15-year war had carved lines into his face, turned his hair silver at the temples. But his eyes, those same brown eyes that had looked up at a Vryn merchant in a blood-soaked medical bay, those eyes still held fire. He listened to Captain Vasquez's report in silence. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Ambassador Kalith," he finally said, his voice distant. "I never forgot. I sent letters, tried to thank her properly, but communication across species lines during wartime." He shook his head. "And now the Zarkonians are going to kill her. Kill all of them. Sir, I'm requesting authorization to deploy the Indomitable Will and her escort fleet to defend Riftgate 7. I know it's politically complicated." "Denied." "Captain," Celine felt her heart sink. "Sir, these are the people who saved your life." "Denied," Chen repeated, but there was something in his tone that made her pause. "The Indomitable Will and her escorts are far too small a force for what I have in mind. Captain Vasquez, you are hereby temporarily reassigned to Joint Task Force Victory. Report to Admiral Okonkwo at Rally Point Theta." Celine's eyes widened. Rally Point Theta. That was where the Terran Navy's heavy assault fleet was stationed. The big guns. The planet crackers. "Sir, Task Force Victory is our primary offensive fleet. If we redeploy them to defend a civilian station..." "Captain." Chen's expression was stone. 15 years ago, a Vryn merchant looked at a dying human soldier and decided that one life mattered more than politics, more than safety, more than the logical calculations of war. She risked everything, her ship, her crew, her life to save me. One life, Captain. Mine. He leaned forward, and Selene saw something blazing in his eyes that she recognized. It was the same thing she felt. The thing that made humans human. The Zarkonians are about to learn a fundamental truth about humanity, Chen continued. We remember our debts, and we pay them in full with interest. Task Force Victory will deploy to Rift Gate 7 within the hour. You'll have 72 capital ships, full fighter complement, and authorization to engage any hostile forces threatening the Vryn Sanctuary Station. The political fallout is my problem, not yours. Chen smiled grimly. Let me worry about the diplomatic corps and the council. You just get to Rift Gate 7 before the Zarkonians do. And Captain? When you arrive, please extend my regards to Ambassador Keleth. Tell her that Marcus Chen keeps his promises. The channel closed. Selene stood motionless for a moment, then turned to Commander Park. His face reflected the same mixture of shock and savage satisfaction she felt. You heard the General, she said. Plot a course for Rally Point Theta. Maximum burn. And somebody get me the tactical profiles on those Zarkonian warships. It's time we taught them what happens when you threaten Earth's friends. As the indomitable will leaped into faster-than-light travel, Selene allowed herself a fierce smile. The Zarkonians had made a fatal miscalculation. They'd studied human tactics, human weapons, human technology, but they'd never understood the one thing that made humanity truly dangerous. Humans didn't forget, and they never, ever abandoned their friends. Ambassador Keleth watched the approaching Zarkonian fleet with 4 eyes that had seen too much death. The station's long-range sensors painted a picture of overwhelming force. 200 warships. Enough firepower to reduce Rift Gate 7 to atoms within minutes. Evacuation is proceeding, Thorax reported beside her. The first merchant was ancient now, his carapace dulled with age, but he'd refused to retire. But we have 30,000 souls aboard. We need at least 6 more hours to get everyone to the transports. We don't have 6 hours. Keleth's voice was calm, resigned. We have maybe 30 minutes before they're in firing range. We could surrender. They're Zarkonians. They don't accept surrenders, especially not from those they've declared collaborators. Keleth pressed her primary hands against the cool viewport. We knew this day would come. The moment we started helping human refugees, we signed our death warrants. No regrets? Thorax asked quietly. None. And she meant it. Over 15 years, her network had saved thousands of human lives. Children, mostly. Families fleeing the genocide. They'd moved in the shadows, always careful, always maintaining the fiction of neutrality. But the Zarkonians weren't fools. They'd noticed. Now came the reckoning. Incoming transmission, the communications officer called out. It's from the Zarkonian fleet commander. The hologram materialized a massive Zarkonian, his scales marked with the insignia of high command. The same commander who had boarded her ship 15 years ago, Keleth realized. He'd risen in rank just as she'd feared. Ambassador Keleth. His voice was a predatory rumble. I told you to choose your side carefully. You chose poorly. We are merchants, Keleth replied, keeping her voice steady. We trade with all species. You harbored human vermin. You fed them, healed them, helped them escape our righteous cleansing. The commander's lipless mouth twisted in something like a smile. Did you think we wouldn't notice? That we wouldn't track the pattern of human survivors who passed through Vryn space? Keleth said nothing. There was nothing to say. You will remain on that station, the commander continued. You will witness the death of everything you built. And then, when you're the last one alive, I will personally come aboard and the transmission cut off. Keleth blinked in confusion. What happened? New contacts. The sensor officer's voice cracked with shock. Multiple FTL signatures emerging from hyperspace. Reading 72 No 73 capital ships. Configuration matches, Commander. Those are Terran warships. The view screen shifted and Keleth felt her heart skip several beats. Emerging from the shimmering distortion of faster-than-light travel came the human fleet, and it was magnificent. At the center, a massive dreadnought that bristled with enough weaponry to crack continents. Surrounding it, dozens of cruisers, destroyers, carriers, a force that dwarfed the Zarkonian fleet in both size and obvious power. Incoming transmission, communications reported, from the Terran flagship. A human female appeared on the screen wearing the uniform of a Terran Navy captain. She was young, fierce-looking with dark skin and eyes that burned with determination. Ambassador Keyleth of House Vryn, this is Captain Celine Vasquez of the Terran dreadnought Indomitable Will, commanding Joint Task Force Victory. The human's expression softened slightly. I bring greetings from General Marcus Chen. He asked me to tell you that he keeps his promises. Keyleth's legs nearly buckled. Marcus, the dying boy she'd saved 15 years ago. He'd remembered. Captain Vasquez, you shouldn't be here. This will create enormous political complications for your people. With respect, Ambassador, humans don't abandon our friends. Vasquez's smile was sharp as a blade. Task Force Victory is here to ensure the safety of Riftgate 7 and all Vryn civilians. Any hostile forces that approach this station will be engaged and destroyed. Those are our orders. Direct from General Chen himself. Another transmission cut in the Zarkonian commander, and his earlier confidence had evaporated. Terran ships, you are in neutral space. Your presence here is a violation of Commander. Vasquez's voice dropped to a temperature that could freeze helium. Let me make this absolutely clear. The beings on that station saved the life of one of our people when they had every reason to leave him to die. They've helped thousands more at great risk to themselves. As far as humanity is concerned, Riftgate 7 is under our protection. You would risk full-scale war over a merchant station? We'd risk full-scale war over a single life if that life belonged to someone who helped us. Vasquez leaned forward. But since you asked, yes, Commander. This is us drawing a line. Cross it, and you'll discover exactly why humans have held you to a stalemate for 15 years despite being outnumbered 10-1. The Zarkonian fleet had halted, hanging in space at the edge of weapons range. Keyleth could almost feel the commander's rage through the void. This isn't over, human. No, Vasquez agreed. It isn't, but it is over for today. You have two options. Withdraw peacefully, or find out what 73 Terran warships can do when properly motivated. Choose quickly. My trigger fingers are getting itchy. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the Zarkonian fleet began to reverse course, backing away from Riftgate 7. They didn't retreat entirely, that would have been too much for their pride, but they withdrew to a safe distance. Watching, waiting, Vasquez turned her attention back to Keyleth. Ambassador, General Chen would like to speak with you personally if you're willing. He's been trying to thank you for 15 years. Keyleth felt moisture gathering in her eyes, a human habit she'd picked up from treating so many of them. Captain Vasquez, I don't understand. Why would your entire species risk so much for us? We're just merchants. We're not warriors, not strategically important. Ambassador. Vasquez's expression gentled. You saved the life of a human when you had every logical reason not to. You risked your ship, your crew, your life for a stranger. That's not something we forget. Ever. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of conviction. One of our ancient philosophers once said, "Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down their life for their friends. You were willing to do that for us, Ambassador. For one wounded Marine you'd never met, how could we possibly do less for you?" The quantum communication channel linking Riftgate 7 to Terran Strategic Command carried data encrypted 7 layers deep, but Marcus Chen had ordered all privacy blocks removed. He wanted this conversation on record. He wanted history to remember. When Ambassador Keyleth's image appeared, Marcus had to stop himself from breaking down. She'd aged 15 years showed on her carapace, silver patterns spreading across the greenish chitin. But her 4 eyes still held that same gentle compassion he remembered from the medical bay. "Sergeant Chen," she said softly, or should I say General Chen. "Marcus is fine, Ambassador," he smiled. "I owe you everything, including the informality of a first name. You owe me nothing. I did what any decent being would do." "That's where you're wrong." Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "Ambassador Keyleth, may I be frank with you?" "Please." "When you saved me 15 years ago, I was 23 years old, fresh out of training, full of idealism and terror in equal measure. I just watched my entire platoon die on Kepler 442. Watched 3 billion people burn. I was ready to give up, ready to believe that the universe was nothing but cruelty and death." He paused, remembering. The pain, the blood, the certainty that he would die alone in the dark. Then you appeared, a merchant from a neutral species who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. You looked at me, a soldier from a losing war, a member of a species being exterminated, and you decided I was worth saving. More than that, you risked your entire crew to get me to safety. Keyleth's mandibles trembled slightly. I only did what was right. Exactly, Marcus smiled. You showed me that even in the darkest times, even in a war of extinction, there were still people in the universe who chose mercy over expedience. Compassion over safety. You reminded me what we were fighting for. He stood, moving to the viewport of his office. Outside, Earth hung in space, blue and green and precious. After you saved me, I spent 2 weeks in a medical coma. When I woke up, I was in a human field hospital, and they told me about the shuttle, about the Vryn who risked everything. I made a promise to myself that day I would survive. I would fight. And I would make sure that when this war was over, the galaxy would be a place where people like you, people who chose mercy, would never have to fear for that choice. You've done that, Keyleth said. Your fleet's arrival today is just the beginning. Marcus turned back to face her. Keyleth, I'm going to tell you something that's classified at the highest levels. Something that only a handful of humans know. He took a deep breath. We're winning. Keyleth's eyes widened in all directions. What? But the reports say the reports are wrong. Strategically necessary lies to keep the Zarkonians overconfident. Marcus pulled up a holographic display. 6 months ago, our scientists completed Project Prometheus. We've developed a weapon system that will end this war within the year. The Zarkonians don't know. Most of humanity doesn't know. But it's real, it's tested, and it's ready. Then why tell me? Because when we deploy it, when we force the Zarkonians to the negotiating table, I want you to understand something. Marcus met her eyes. Humanity is going to dictate the terms of peace. We're going to reshape the political order of this galaxy. And when we do, we're going to make sure that species like yours, peaceful merchants, healers, those who chose compassion over convenience, are protected. Guaranteed. Enshrined in treaties backed by Terran warships. Keyleth was silent for a long moment. That's a remarkable promise. It's a debt, Marcus corrected. You saved one human life and asked for nothing in return. So humanity is going to save millions of yours, and we're going to build a galaxy where no one has to choose between their conscience and their survival. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept humanity's friendship. Marcus smiled. Say you'll let us be the guardian angels in the shadows for a change. Say you'll trust us the way you trusted that one dying Marine 15 years ago. Keyleth's mandibles clicked softly, the Vryn expression of deep emotion. Marcus Chen, you were worth saving then, and your species is worth believing in now. Yes, we accept your friendship. Good. Marcus straightened. Then let me tell you about the new galaxy we're going to build. One where merchants can trade freely, where compassion is rewarded instead of punished, and where anyone who threatens peaceful species learns exactly what human revenge looks like. 3 months later, the war ended. The weapon system known as Project Prometheus turned out to be less a gun and more a fundamental shift in battlefield dynamics. Terran scientists had cracked the Zarkonian shields not by overwhelming them with force, but by understanding the quantum harmonics that made them work and creating a nullification field. Every Zarkonian warship suddenly became vulnerable to conventional weapons. The first major engagement happened at the Battle of Arcturus Station. The Zarkonians deployed their full war fleet, over 3,000 warships, the largest assembled force in the history of the conflict. They expected another grinding slugfest like the previous 15 years of combat. Instead, they found themselves facing Terran guns that, for the first time, could actually touch them. Admiral Okonkwo, commanding the Terran fleet, sent a message before firing a single shot. For Kepler 442, for every human child you burned, for every species you terrorized into submission, this is the reckoning. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the Zarkonian fleet was scattered, broken. Over 1,000 warships destroyed, the rest fleeing in disarray. Terran losses, 12 ships, and most of those were recoverable. The silence that followed was deafening. For 15 years, the Zarkonians had grown accustomed to near invulnerability. Their shields had made them legends, terrors, seemingly unstoppable. But humans had done what they always did. They'd adapted, innovated, and overcome. The shield that had protected the Zarkonians for generations was now useless. Every military calculation, every strategic assumption had become obsolete in a single engagement. The Zarkonian High Command sued for peace within a week. The negotiations took place on a neutral station, with representatives from dozens of species present. The Zarkonians, their military power shattered, had little bargaining position. They expected harsh terms, probably occupation, possibly even the kind of genocidal retribution they'd inflicted on others. What they got was surprising. General Marcus Chen, leading the human delegation, outlined the terms. The Zarkonians would withdraw from all occupied territories. They would pay reparations not to humanity, but to the species they had harmed. They would submit to an interstellar tribunal for war crimes. Their military would be reduced to defensive forces only, monitored by an independent peacekeeping organization. But there would be no occupation, no retributive genocide, no eye-for-an-eye destruction. "We could exterminate you," Marcus said calmly, his eyes on the Zarkonian delegation. "We have the capacity. After what you did to Kepler 442, to the colonies, to the billions you murdered, we'd be justified. Many in my government want exactly that." The Zarkonian representatives said nothing. What could they say? "But we're not you," Marcus continued. 15 years ago, when I was dying, someone showed me mercy when they had every reason not to. They taught me that the measure of a civilization isn't how they treat their friends. It's how they treat those who can't defend themselves, even their enemies." He leaned forward. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to accept these terms. You're going to rebuild your society around something other than conquest. And you're going to learn to live in a galaxy where compassion matters more than shields." The Zarkonian High Commander, his scales dulled with age and defeat, finally spoke. "And if we refuse?" Marcus's smile was colder than the void. "Then we'll demonstrate Project Prometheus again, and again, and again, until you understand that humanity's mercy is a gift, not a weakness. Your choice, Commander." The treaty was signed within 3 days. 5 years after the war's end, Ambassador Kalith stood in the Grand Hall of Unity Station, the new political center of the reorganized galactic community. Around her, representatives from hundreds of species mingled, conducted business, and built the new order that humanity had promised. The station itself was a marvel, a joint construction project between humans, Vryn, Centaurians, Delphians, and a dozen other species. It orbited a neutron star in neutral space, symbolic of the new balance. Dangerous if misused, but capable of sustaining life and civilization with proper care. "Quite something, isn't it?" a familiar voice said behind her. Kalith turned to find Marcus Chen, now retired from military service but serving as Earth's ambassador at large. He'd aged gracefully, his silver hair and lined face giving him a distinguished appearance. But his eyes, those eyes that had looked up at her in desperation so many years ago, still held warmth. "Marcus, or should I say Ambassador Chen?" "Marcus is still fine," he smiled. "How's the merchant business?" "Booming." Keyleth clicked her mandibles in amusement. "With open trade lanes and actual peace, the merchant fleet has expanded by 300%. We're opening new routes every week." "Good. That's what we hoped for." Marcus gestured around the Grand Hall. "This is what you made possible, you know. I saved one life. You saved the life that mattered." Marcus's expression grew serious. "Kalith, I want to show you something." He led her through the station's corridors to an observation deck. Through the viewport, dozens of ships moved in graceful patterns, merchant vessels, passenger liners, even a few warships on patrol, but all flying under the banner of the new Galactic Concordat, the treaty organization that humanity had established. "Every time I look at this," Marcus said softly, "I think about that medical bay, about how close I came to dying, about how different everything would be if you'd made the logical choice instead of the compassionate one. You would have done the same. Maybe. But you did it first." He turned to her. "The Terran Assembly has asked me to convey something to you officially. It's a bit of a ceremony, so I hope you don't mind." Before Kalith could respond, the doors opened and a delegation entered. Humans, yes, but also Centaurians, Delphians, even a few reformed Zarkonians, dozens of species, all wearing formal diplomatic attire. A human woman stepped forward, older, distinguished, wearing the insignia of the Terran president. Ambassador Keyleth of House Vryn, President Amara Washington said formally, "On behalf of humanity and our allies in the Galactic Concordat, I present you with the Order of Terra, our highest civilian honor. This award recognizes your act of mercy 15 years ago, which saved the life of General Marcus Chen and, by extension, changed the course of galactic history. She pinned a medal to Calith's chest, a silver circle depicting Earth, surrounded by stars. But more than that, Washington continued, we recognize your years of humanitarian work, your dedication to helping those caught in the war's crossfire, and your unwavering commitment to compassion, even when it endangered your life and the lives of those you led. Calith felt her legs trembling. Madam President, I only did what was right. Exactly. Washington smiled. And in doing so, you reminded us all what's truly worth fighting for. The new galactic concordat, this entire peace we've built, is founded on the principle you demonstrated, that every life matters, that compassion is strength, and that civilization is measured by how we treat those who can't defend themselves. She gestured around the observation deck. There are 30 billion beings alive today across 300 systems because of the peace we forged. Billions more will be born into a galaxy without the fear of extinction wars. All of this traces back to one Vryn merchant who looked at a dying human and decided he was worth saving. The assembled delegates applauded, some with hands, some with tentacles, some with sound-producing organs unique to their species. But the sentiment was universal. Marcus stepped close to Calith, his voice low. I told you we pay our debts. This galaxy safe, peaceful, prosperous, this is humanity saying thank you. This is us keeping the promise I made when I woke up in that field hospital. Calith looked out at the stars, at the ships moving in peace, at the delegates from species who had been enemies now working together. And she understood. She'd saved one life, but that one life had saved millions more. Marcus, she said softly, what you've built here, it's more than I ever imagined possible. We built it together, he corrected. You planted the seed of compassion. We just helped it grow. 20 years after the war's end, a young Vryn merchant named Talix was studying history in the archives of Unity Station. She was preparing for her first solo trade mission, and her mentor had insisted she understand the origins of the Concordat before she ventured into the galaxy. She found a recording old, from the war years, nearly lost to data corruption, but someone had preserved it, restored it, made sure it survived. It showed a medical bay, a dying human, and a Vryn merchant making a choice. Talix watched Ambassador Calith save Marcus Chen's life, watched her risk everything for a stranger, watched the moment that changed galactic history. When the recording ended, Talix sat in silence for a long time. Then she opened her personal journal and wrote, Today I learned that every choice matters. Every life matters. I learned that my ancestor, Ambassador Calith, once helped a human for no reason other than it was right. And that single act of compassion rippled outward across decades, touching billions of lives. I also learned why the Terran guns, when they fire now, are followed by silence. Not the silence of death, but the silence of respect. The silence of a species that learned that true strength isn't measured in firepower, but in knowing when to show mercy. The humans could have destroyed the Zarkonians, could have avenged their billions of dead with overwhelming violence. Instead, they chose to build something better. They chose to honor the mercy shown to one of their own, by showing mercy themselves. Every time a Terran warship fires now in exercises, in defense of peaceful species, in protection of the weak, the rest of the galaxy falls silent. Not in fear, but in acknowledgement. We're reminded that there's a species among the stars who wields terrible power, but chooses compassion, and that silence is more powerful than any weapon. Tomorrow I begin my journey as a merchant. I will carry forward the legacy of Ambassador Calith. I will remember that every being I meet, every transaction I make, every choice I face, they all matter. Because you never know which act of kindness will change the galaxy. The humans have a saying, to whom much is given, much is expected. They were given the power to reshape the stars. And they used it to build a galaxy where people like me, young merchants with dreams, can travel safely between worlds, can help those in need, can make a difference. That's the true meaning of the Terran silence. It's not about their guns. It's about what they chose not to do with them. It's about the mercy they learned from us, and the mercy they showed in return. And I will carry that lesson with me always. 40 years after the war, the galaxy had transformed so completely that younger generations struggled to imagine the darkness that had come before. The Zarkonian Dominion, once a terror that had lasted for centuries, was now a reformed constitutional democracy, its military commanders tried and punished, its people learning to build instead of conquer. But in the memorial halls of Earth, Mars and 100 other human worlds they made sure no one forgot. General Marcus Chen, now 83 years old and officially retired for the second time, walked slowly through the memorial of Kepler 442. The entire structure was made of fused glass, actual glass from the planet's surface, recovered after the bombardment. 3 billion names were etched into its walls, floor to ceiling, corridor after corridor. Behind him walked his granddaughter, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, fresh from the Terran Naval Academy. She'd never known war, only the peace her grandfather had helped forge. "Grandpa," she said quietly, "is it true? What they say about the silence?" Marcus paused before a section of wall bearing the names of his platoon. 42 young men and women who'd died so that he could escape. He touched one name, Corporal James Martinez, 19 years old. "What do they say?" he asked. "That when Terran guns fire, the galaxy falls silent. That it's a sign of respect or fear or—" She trailed off. "No one seems to agree on why." Marcus smiled sadly. "It's simpler than people think, Sarah. Come, let me tell you a story." They walked through the memorial, and Marcus spoke of a young sergeant dying in a medical bay, of a Vrin merchant who risked everything, of a promise made in blood and pain and desperate gratitude. "When we finally had the power to end the war," Marcus explained, "we had a choice. We could become what the Zarkonians were, conquerors, destroyers bent on revenge, or we could become something else. You chose mercy. We chose to honor the mercy shown to us." Marcus stopped before a holographic display showing the final battle at Arcturus. "When our ships opened fire that day, when Zarkonian shields failed for the first time in history, we could have annihilated them. Ship after ship, we had them defenseless." The hologram played out the battle. Terran guns firing. Zarkonian vessels crippled but not destroyed. Over and over the pattern repeated: disable, don't destroy. Cripple, don't kill. We fired to stop them, not to exterminate them. Every shot was calculated, precise, minimal casualties. It took longer, cost us more ships, put more human lives at risk. But we'd learned from Ambassador Khalith that every life matters, even enemy lives when they're defenseless. Sarah watched the battle in silence. Finally she asked, "And the silence?" "Happens naturally now," Marcus said. "During the war, communications channels would go quiet when Terran weapons fired. Not because we demanded it, but because other species were watching, waiting to see what we'd do with all that power. Would we show restraint? Would we remember that we'd once been the ones who needed mercy?" He gestured to the memorial around them. 3 billion humans died here, billions more across the colonies. We had every justification for revenge, for total war, for making the Zarkonians extinct. And when our guns proved we could do exactly that, he paused. The galaxy held its breath, watched us choose restraint over revenge, watched us honor the mercy shown to one Marine by showing mercy to billions of enemies. So the silence is respect. The silence is acknowledgement, Marcus corrected gently. It's the galaxy recognizing that humanity wields power but doesn't abuse it, that we learned the right lessons from the war, that we're the species who, when given the choice between vengeance and justice, between destruction and rebuilding, between hatred and hope, we choose the harder, better path. Sarah looked at her grandfather with new understanding, because of what Ambassador Khalith did for you, because of what she taught me about what we could be. Marcus touched the glass wall one more time. These 3 billion people and all the others who died their deaths meant something, because we made sure their legacy wasn't just more death. We turned their sacrifice into a galaxy where no species has to fear extinction, where merchants like Khalith can travel freely, where young officers like you grow up never knowing the horror of total war. He turned to face his granddaughter fully. The Terran silence isn't about our weapons, Sarah. It's about what we chose not to do with them. Every time a Terran gun fires now, whether in training, in defense, or in the rare enforcement action, the galaxy pauses. They're checking, making sure we're still the species that chose mercy, making sure we're still honoring that debt, and are we? Marcus smiled. That's for your generation to decide. I've done my part. Now it's your turn to carry forward what Ambassador Khalith started, to prove that humans deserve that silence, that respect, that trust. Sarah straightened, her hand moving to salute. I won't let you down, sir. I know you won't. Marcus returned the salute, then softened. None of you will. Because you were raised in the galaxy, we built one where compassion matters, where every life has value, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. They walked together toward the memorial's exit, Outside, Unity Station hung in space, its lights twinkling like terrestrial stars. Ships from hundreds of species moved in peaceful commerce, protected by Terran warships that never needed to fire except in the rarest of circumstances. And when they did fire, the galaxy fell silent not in fear, but in recognition of what humanity had become. In the archives of Terran Strategic Command, locked behind 7 layers of security, there existed a classified document known only to the highest levels of government. It was titled Project Prometheus Final Deployment Assessment. The document contained a truth that Marcus Chen had kept secret for 40 years, that he would take to his grave, that only 3 people in the galaxy knew. Project Prometheus had been a bluff. The weapon system that supposedly nullified Zarkonian shields had worked but only for 72 hours. The quantum harmonics that disabled their defensive fields destabilized after 3 days of operation, and Terran scientists had never managed to make it permanent. They'd had one shot, one battle, one chance to break the stalemate. The Battle of Arcturus had been that chance, and Marcus Chen, commanding the operation, had gambled everything on the belief that the Zarkonians would break psychologically before the humans ran out of time technologically. He'd been right. The Zarkonians, seeing their invincible shields fail for the first time in history, had panicked. They'd assumed the Terrans had cracked the fundamental technology, that every ship was now vulnerable forever. They'd sued for peace before discovering the truth that within a week, their shields would have been just as effective as ever. But Marcus had also made another calculation, one that weighed on him more heavily than the military deception. He'd ordered his ships to disable, not destroy, to cripple, not kill, even knowing they might only have days before the advantage vanished, even knowing that mercy might cost human lives. He'd held true to the lesson Ambassador Keyleth had taught him. Every life mattered, even enemy lives. If he'd ordered total destruction, if he'd taken advantage of those 72 hours to commit genocide against the Zarkonian fleet, the war might have ended faster. Fewer human casualties, complete victory, but it would have made humans into the very thing they'd fought against. So he'd chosen restraint, chosen mercy, chosen to honor the debt humanity owed to a Vryn merchant who'd saved one life and, in doing so, saved humanity's soul. The gamble had paid off in ways Marcus could never have predicted. The Zarkonians, terrified and broken, had surrendered before discovering the weapon's limitation. The galaxy, watching humanity's restraint, had embraced the peace. And the legend of Terran mercy of the species, that could have destroyed their enemies but chose compassion instead, had become the foundation of the new galactic order. But Marcus had never told anyone the full truth. Not the president, not the military council, not even Keyleth herself. Because the silence that moment when the galaxy held its breath watching what humans would do with ultimate power was real. Humanity had faced that test and passed it. The fact that the power was temporary didn't change the choice they'd made. They'd been given the capability to destroy, and they'd chosen to heal instead. That was the true meaning of the Terran silence. Not the fear of human weapons, not the respect for human power, but the acknowledgement that humanity, when given the choice between vengeance and mercy, between destruction and creation, between hatred and hope, would always choose the harder, better path. Because one Vryn merchant had shown them the way. 100 years after Ambassador Keyleth saved Marcus Chen's life, a young human diplomat named David Chen Keyleth stood before the Galactic Concordat Assembly. He was the great-grandson of Marcus Chen and the adopted descendant of Keyleth's line, his name honoring both lineages. He'd been chosen to deliver the Centennial Address, a speech commemorating the war's end and the century of peace that followed. Around him, representatives from over 500 species waited in silence, the same silence that had become legendary, that followed Terran weapons, that acknowledged humanity's choice to build rather than destroy. David looked out at the assembled delegates and began. 100 years ago, a Vryn merchant made a choice. She looked at a dying human soldier and decided he was worth saving, even though every logical calculation said otherwise, even though her species was neutral, even though helping him risked everything, even though he was just one life in a war that had already claimed billions. She chose compassion. He paused, letting the words settle. That human soldier was my great-grandfather, Marcus Chen. He lived because of Ambassador Keyleth's mercy. He fought because she'd shown him that compassion still existed in the darkness. And when humanity finally had the power to end the war, he made sure we honored the lesson she'd taught us. David gestured to a holographic display showing the galaxy hundreds of systems, billions of beings, all living in unprecedented peace. This is Ambassador Keyleth's legacy. Not just the peace we forged, but the principle we learned. That civilization is measured by how we treat those who cannot defend themselves. That mercy is not weakness, but the highest form of strength. That every life, human, Vryn, Zarkonian, or any of the 500 species represented here today, every life matters. He looked directly at the Zarkonian delegation. They sat uncomfortably, still bearing the weight of their ancestors' sins, but also the pride of their species' reformation. "We could have destroyed you," David said simply. "We had the power. We had the justification. We had 3 billion reasons burning on Kepler 442 alone. But we'd learned from Ambassador Keyleth that vengeance creates only more suffering, while mercy creates possibility." The Zarkonian Ambassador Young, part of a generation born after the war, stood slowly. "Human Chen Keyleth," she said, her voice carrying the harmonics of deep emotion. "On behalf of my people, I acknowledge the debt we owe. Not just to humanity, but to the Vryn merchant whose compassion started the chain of mercy that saved my species from extinction. We are alive today because you chose to be better than we were." "No," David corrected gently. "You're alive today because we chose to be who we are. Humans, flawed, angry, capable of terrible violence, but also capable of terrible compassion. We learned from Ambassador Keyleth that the second capability is what defines us." He turned back to the full assembly. "Every time a Terran warship fires its weapons, the galaxy falls silent. Our children ask us why, and we tell them this story of a merchant who saved a soldier, of a soldier who became a general, of a general who chose mercy over vengeance, and of a species that learned the most important lesson in galactic history." David's voice grew stronger, filling the chamber. "That lesson is this: power without compassion is tyranny. Victory without mercy is hollow, and strength without kindness is just another form of weakness." He raised his hand, and across the assembly representatives from every species rose in unison. The gesture had become traditional, the standing silence, performed every year on the anniversary of the war's end. For 1 full minute, 500 species stood in absolute quiet, honoring the Vryn merchant who'd saved 1 human life and in doing so, taught a species of warriors how to be peacemakers. When the minute ended, David spoke the traditional closing words. "We are the inheritors of Ambassador Keyleth's mercy and General Marcus Chen's choice. We are the builders of the galaxy they envisioned, where compassion matters more than conquest, where peace is earned through justice, not subjugation, and where every being, regardless of species, can live without fear." He looked out at the assembled delegates one final time. "May we always be worthy of the silence. May we always remember what it means. And may we always choose mercy over vengeance, compassion over cruelty, and hope over hatred." The assembly erupted not in applause, but in the unique expressions of approval from 500 different species, a cacophony of chirps, harmonics, light patterns, and sounds that together formed a symphony of unity. And in that moment, looking out at the galaxy Ambassador Keyleth and General Marcus Chen had built together, David understood the true power of a single act of kindness. It echoed across stars. It rippled through generations. It changed everything. 1 human saved. 1 choice made. 1 lesson learned. And the silence that followed Terran guns firing was not about weapons at all. It was about a galaxy acknowledging that humanity had learned what it truly meant to be strong. They will know we are humans by our love, by our mercy, and by the silence that follows when we choose compassion over vengeance. This is the legacy of Ambassador Keyleth. This is the promise of General Marcus Chen. This is humanity's gift to the galaxy, not our weapons, but our choice to wield them with wisdom. From the Concordat Charter, Article 1,